Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, we're getting into the next episode, episode 11. No introduction needed. Let's just get right into it, all right? 10th of November, 1939.
November 10th, 1939. Adolf Hitler runs Germany with an iron hand, but there is a great deal of opposition to him and his rule and the oppression and terror that it entails. It comes from both inside and outside his structures of power, and this week, Adolf Hitler is nearly killed.
Guys, I've heard Vladimir Putin has had, maybe it's exaggerated the number, but I've heard he's had like 50 attempts on his life, which I'm not really surprised, but I mean, escaping that many times.
Andy Nidell, this is World War II. Last week, Heinrich Himmler announced Nazi Germany's new procreation order. It would be the formal and formally organized duty of females of good blood to become mothers to soldiers setting off for battle. There was again no action in the field on the Western Front, and indeed, the British were even beginning to call this war without war the phony war. The Finns were still refusing the Soviet Union's territorial demands, and the Soviets were losing patience. However, negotiations are still in progress. At the start of the week, on the 4th, the Finnish delegation in Moscow get a phone call that the Russians want to meet them at the Kremlin at 6 p.m. At that meeting, Joseph Stalin says, the Soviet government is the only government that could tolerate an independent Finland. The Tsarist government could not tolerate it, nor could the Kerensky government. But the Soviet government demands that its borders be protected. For this reason, the problem of the Finnish Gulf is important. The Soviet government will not dispose of its feelings on Hanko. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov adds, Finland could legally call Hanko a concession, a rental, an exchange, a trade, anything she wants to. Hanko is on the Finnish mainland at the mouth of the Gulf of Finland, and one of the main Soviet demands is to be allowed to lease it and fortify it. Envoy Juho Paasikivi responds that Hanko could not be given up under any circumstances. The Russians then start asking for islands in the Gulf east of Hanko. Stalin points at some on a map and asks, do you need these? Paasikivi says, well, that's a new thing. I need instructions from Helsinki. There is another meeting on the 9th that ends with nothing decided, but friendly enough, with Stalin saying all the best and Molotov au revoir. They were not the only ones meeting and debating this week. In the United States, after fierce debate, Congress alters the neutrality.
All right, just before we get into this right here, maybe with your really good allies that you trust, you might be okay, fine, we'll lease it for you for military purposes. But if you were extremely close allies that you could trust that much to do that, then would you really need it to lease it to them at all in the first place? Especially so close to your homeland? And so I would not trust anything the Soviet envoys would say about that at all.
This week. In the United States, after fierce debate, Congress alters the Neutrality Acts on the 4th. Now, the Neutrality Act of 1937 forbade U.S. citizens from traveling on belligerent ships and American merchant ships from transporting war material to belligerent states, even if produced outside the United States. American ships and citizens were also banned from entering defined war zones. Those provisions remain in place, but now private American companies can sell war material as long as the purchaser transports it and pays for it on a cash and carry basis. So only private companies, only foreign ships, and paid for up front. This intends to exclude Germany because of Britain's naval strength preventing German merchant traffic across the Atlantic. Britain and France immediately set up purchasing missions in Washington. With or without American munitions.
Wait a second. So this is in 1939, right? No. When was this is important for me to say this next point. When was FDR reelected his second term? In 1936. Okay. Okay. The reason I wanted to look that up is because there's only really 3 reasons that you would want to change that neutrality agreement for these new changes. One, at least 3 that I can think of. One is for economic reasons. It's hurting your bottom line, and you want to make more money through trade with these people, right? 2 would be you're sympathetic towards Britain and France. You know, Britain and their need for weaponry and trade as they're at war. 3, which is why I looked up when, would be FDR maybe, because he knows Americans are very much against sending soldiers and going to war in Europe, that maybe this was like, all right, maybe if I slowly edge our way towards being more involved in the war in some way, but in a very small way, just a small change to neutrality agreement, then maybe that could make you end up being able to go to war despite your voters' wishes. And so I looked it up to see if at the time he changed the neutrality agreement, if it was like right after his new election, which it wasn't. It was like 2 years later, but because that would have been a little sleazy, like saying, hey, we're going to be neutral, but then right when you get re-election, then you start changing it a bit. But okay.
Germany is still making Washington. With or without American munitions, Germany is still making war plans. Or at least Adolf Hitler is. On the 5th, he meets with German Army Commander-in-Chief Walter von Brauchitsch to discuss plans for the invasion of Belgium and Holland. Hitler sets the launch date for next week on the 12th. Von Brauchitsch argues very strongly against it, saying the army is too weak at the moment. Hitler shouts him down, even, according to Martin Gilbert, verbally abusing him for the army's defeatist attitude. Franz Halder, Brauchisch's chief of staff, had led a group that considered plans to overthrow Hitler if he could not be persuaded to postpone the attack. Plans for the army coup were fairly detailed, but Halder had only received a few promises of support from senior officers. The support of junior officers is lesser, as they tend to more closely follow party line.
Makes sense.
Halder himself, as a serving officer, is unwilling to murder his head of state during wartime. So between that, a limited chance of success, and a chance remark of Hitler's that implies he knows of the plot, Halder and von Brauchitsch called things off. Note.
I wonder what the remark was, like nonchalantly being like, imagine if some of my officers were planning on taking me out or something like that, and they're like, oh god, maybe he knows.
What army Halder and von Brauchitsch called things off. Note. What army opposition there is to Hitler is not based on morals, but on his usurping of army functions. Well, anyhow, on the 7th, Hitler postpones the offensive because of inclement weather. The thing is, von Brauchisch's points were actually really good ones and could not really be denied. The army is unready, and the winter weather impedes tanks, and the lack of daylight impedes planes. A crucial element of the Blitzkrieg is the need of 5 straight days of good weather to give the Luftwaffe a chance to destroy the French Air Force. The meteorology report on the 7th is unsatisfactory. But if those army officers were only considering removing Hitler, other people are actually trying to do it this week. On November 8th, the anniversary of the Beer Hall Putsch, Hitler's failed 1923 coup attempt to seize power in Bavaria, he makes a speech at the Bürger Braukeller, the beer hall in Munich where the putsch was launched. Just a few minutes after Hitler finishes his speech and leaves, earlier than expected, a bomb blows up. It was planted in the pillar just behind where he spoke. 7 people die and over 60 are injured. The assassin is caught that night trying to cross into Switzerland. He is Georg Elze, a watchmaker who has recently been discharged from Dachau concentration camp, where he had been interned as a communist sympathizer. He is now sent to Sachsenhausen camp. At Munich's cathedral, Cardinal Michael Faulhaber...
Wow, the fear on this guy's face is terrifying.
now sent to Sachsenhausen camp. At Munich's cathedral, Cardinal Michael Faulhaber celebrates Hitler's miraculous escape with a solemn mass. And, according to one commentator, the reaction in London to the news was summed up in a calm British bad luck, as though someone had missed a pheasant. One source I read, World War II Day by Day, says that the bomb was in fact planted by the Nazis themselves as an excuse for cracking down on what remains of the German left. I could not corroborate that source.
Interesting. Interesting. So that I'm not saying that, but that could explain. It could have just been luck that he left early. But if you were trying to do that, then you would leave right before and then have it explode. And then, you know, yeah, that makes sense. I'm not saying that it
remains of the German left.
Definitely
I could not corroborate that source. Well, it seems pretty clear that Elzer had worked alone, but Nazi propaganda blames the British Secret Intelligence Service.
Hold on. He was a watchmaker. How would he... That's a little suspicious. So a watchmaker had the explosive expertise and the ability to get the explosives and the ability to put them behind there all on his own?
Service, who the Germans were trying to stop by any means they could. Walter Schellenberg, an SS intelligence expert, had been in touch with British agents Stevens and Best and convinced them he was part of an anti-Hitler conspiracy. This week, they are lured to Venlo in the Netherlands on the Dutch-German border with promises that they will meet a disaffected German general. One of them carries a list of British agents. Pretty stupid. And the Germans capture many British agents in Czech.
Why? What? Why? Even if it wasn't a trick, what would have been the purpose of having a list on you?
Czechoslovakia and elsewhere because of this. The Germans capture many British agents in Czechoslovakia and elsewhere because of this. This is known as the Venlo incident. But this incident is not just organized to capture a list of agents or to learn British techniques. It is also to give Germany a pretext for invading the Netherlands, since by allowing British agents to operate there, the Dutch are violating their neutrality. The British agents are sent to a concentration camp. But the British have some seriously high-placed double agents in Germany by now. For example, the November 12th date for the attack in the West was known from two different sources. One is General Hans Oster, who is second in command under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris in German intelligence, and he had given the date to the Dutch military attaché in Berlin. The other is also in Canaris's intelligence organization, Paul Tummel, who passed on the date through the Czechoslovak government in exile in Paris. He has been sending classified details of the German military to Czechoslovak intelligence since 1936. I mentioned that Hitler's would-be...
Hold on, are they still talking about the failed explosion?
By allowing British agents to operate there, the Dutch are violating their neutrality. The British agents are sent to a concentration camp. But the British have some seriously high-placed double agents in Germany by now. For example, the November 12th date for the attack in the West was known from two different sources.
The November 12th date to attack, for the Germans to attack West?
One is General Hans Oster, who is second in command under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris in German intelligence, and he had given the date to the Dutch military attaché in Berlin. The other is also in Canaris.
Okay, so the attack in the Netherlands. Okay.
Intelligence organization.
I'm glad I rewinded.
In Berlin. The other is also in Canaris's intelligence organization, Paul Tummel, who passed on the date through the Czechoslovak government in exile in Paris. He has been sending classified details of the German military to Czechoslovak intelligence since 1936. I mentioned that Hitler's would-be assassin was sent to Sachsenhausen. He isn't the only one. On the 5th, all 167 Polish professors at Krakow University are rounded up by the Gestapo and sent to Sachsenhausen. 17 die under torture. On the 9th, 21 Jews sent to Buchenwald to work in the quarry are executed. On the 8th, in Ciechocinek, 50 Polish officers, prisoners of war, are led through the streets with their hands above their heads. They are then shot. Also in the occupied territory this week, on November 9th, Odilo Globochnik is appointed SS and police leader in the Lublin district. He is virulently anti-Semitic and before the war had served as deputy district leader of the Nazi party in Austria, helping to pave the way for Hitler's annexation. And another week of the war comes to an end, with plans to remove Hitler either failing or being abandoned. Soviet plans in Finland are still going nowhere, as are Hitler's for new attacks, at least for the time being. Hitler survived the bomb, either by being really lucky, or if that one source is correct, as planned, but still, in my series on World War I and in our Between Two Wars series, if there's one thing I've discovered, it's that assassination attempts are not easy, and most of the time, they do fail. Now, I cannot say what would have happened had Hitler died this week, but I can fairly confidently say what will happen since he didn't. The atrocities and terror in conquered territory will continue and grow, and Hitler's plans for an attack in the West will become ever more concrete. If you want to learn about Hitler's failed beer hall putsch in 1923, we covered that in Between Two Wars on Time Ghost, and it...
Oh, shoot. Okay. So, one thing is, that is a good question. What would have happened if Hitler was assassinated? I mean, you already have, you know, the Anschluss. You've taken. It's not like if he was attacked, you know, before even the Anschluss or taking over Czechoslovakia. But I mean, they've done both of those. They've annexed Poland, or half of it. The other half the Soviets have. I wonder what would happen if he was killed at this if that assassination attempt was successful. The reason being is that I'm not sure how much of the people around Hitler or anyone or any group of people that would have replaced Hitler, I don't know how adamant they were about attacking the rest of Europe as Hitler was himself. So I would love to hear what you guys have to think there. Do you think they still would have gone to invade the Low Countries, Netherlands and Belgium, and then attack France? Would they try and make some sort of peace deal with France and the UK? And then focus maybe on the Baltics or something, or maybe Scandinavia, and just see how Britain and France react? Would they eventually go on to attack the Soviet Union without even trying to attack France and Britain? It's a really good question that I don't have the slightest clue, because I can't really put myself how hawkish militarily, I can't put myself in the shoes of how hawkish, militarily hawkish, a lot of the people that would have been in charge after he was killed. Another thing that is a little suspicious about this attempted assassination that does make me think it could have possibly been an inside job by Hitler and the Nazis to place blame on the leftists, and that's why Hitler left early. What would help me kind of figure that out would be, were the leftists indeed punished more and blamed for it after that? Because if they weren't, then I can't see that much credence there. But also, the fact that it was just one lone watchmaker who was able to get all those explosives, know how to use explosives. It's not like he can just go on Google or something and then place them there and flee. That seems strange, which could also lead me to believe that maybe it was him being in contact with the British who kind of gave him the know-how of how to set it up and stuff. To be honest, him doing it alone, it seems like the least likely in my mind than the other two. But I don't know, maybe it was like explosives was another hobby of his. I don't know. I would wonder where. So was he sent to work camps? I wonder, did he die? Like, if he was involved in this inside German plot, then would he have been just sent off to a camp and then immediately taken out? So that's really curious. Love you guys. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you learned something or can help me learn something down in the comments. Love y'all. See you guys next time. Bye.